I'd like to welcome you all to the speaker series celebrating the 25th anniversary of graduate studies here at Elmhurst University. My name is Carrie Hewitt, and I am the interim dean of the School of Graduate Studies here at Elmhurst. Tonight's speaker series topic is future-proofing against the challenges of today's workforce. I would like to introduce you to Jessica Sim. Dr. Sim is an associate professor of psychology here at Elmhurst University. She is also the interim program director for the Masters in IO Psychology program here at Elmhurst. And she is going to say a little bit more about our speaker this evening. So thank you so much and welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the School of Graduate Studies lecture series. Tonight, we are so honored to have Krista Warren with us. Krista earned her master's degree in industrial organizational psychology right here at Elmhurst. I had the pleasure of being one of Krista's instructors during her time here in the program. I still recall her team, BMKG, and I valued the diverse business experiences she brought to the classroom. Currently, as a leadership and organization development specialist at Advisa, Krista continues to utilize her background in IO psychology. In her role, she employs data-driven approaches to promote leadership development and improve workplace environments. Today, she will share insights on how we can proactively address the challenges of today's workplace. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Krista Warren.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I'm Krista Warren. I'm very excited to be here tonight, to be back on campus. I've truly missed being here on campus, seeing Carrie and Dr. Sim and learning. However, I don't miss the homework. Nothing against you all. But so it's great to be here as a speaker and truly honored that you thought of me for this, so thank you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about future-proofing against the challenges of today's workplace. We are certainly facing an abundance of issues coming out of the pandemic. And so, as she mentioned, I am an industrial organizational psychology practitioner. And what that means is essentially I help make the workplace be a better place that we all want to be at. And as I was prepping for this talk tonight, I was thinking back to the last time that I was actually here on campus. And it was roughly 4 years ago to the day. We were sitting in our organization development theory class with Tony talking about this mysterious coronavirus. What it was doing, how it was going to potentially impact businesses. We were already hearing a little bit about shipping and logistic impacts, and we were thinking through all of the business impacts. And next thing we know, we were told, hey, you know what, we're gonna do remote virtual classes next week, and we'll see where it goes. And we never came back. So I'm sure many of you have similar stories and circumstances in terms of how the pandemic impacted your life and work as we know it. So we'll be talking a little bit about that, but I do want to start off with just talking about what is industrial organizational psychology, other than a mouthful. I'm going to likely say IO psychology for short throughout our time here together, but I want to start with a definition, and it's truly the scientific study of the workplace. You can think about it as the cross-section between business and psychology, and it's all about taking psychological principles and scientific methods to improving challenges in the workplace. That can be specific to teams, leaders, and just overall organizational challenges. In the same way that organizations utilize financial specialists to help them maximize their financial capital and revenue, IO psychologists do the same with human capital. And as we think about the two sides of IO, they really can be broken down to two houses. We have the industrial, or the I side, which is all about the individual at work. This pertains to recruitment, so hiring folks at an organization, the selection process, maybe utilizing some assessments throughout that, the performance, measuring performance of individuals, overall management, as well as training and developing the folks who are in our organization. And lastly, there's job classification, sorting jobs into job families, as well as conducting job analysis. As we move to the O side, which is all about the broader organization, this is capturing the general themes of leadership. We talk about teams and how we can best utilize teams and put teams together. Also, org development. How might we develop our organization? Change management. As we think about change with the pandemic, how might we roll out change within an organization in a way that's going to be successful? And then lastly, employee experience. So certain mile markers within the employee experience, capturing those data points of what that experience is like for folks. And there are three main tracks that people can fall into in this field, and that is academia as one. So you can be a professor, like Dr. Sim here, teaching at a university, conducting research. You can also go into working with the government. You can be on a government contract. And then there's also the consulting route, where you can be an internal consultant working for one organization, or you can be an external consultant where you're working with multiple clients, usually over contracts or project-based. I myself have found myself within the management consulting aspect of IO psychology, and I have the pleasure of working at a company called Advisa. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what we do at Advisa, and really our mission is quite simple, and that is that we partner with our clients to create effective teams, leaders, and culture, and we empower them to create places where people love to be at work. And I'm extremely passionate about the idea that we spend so much time at work that it should be somewhere we truly love to be. We should wake up and be excited to go to work, not wake up and dreading that alarm going off. We should be able to show up and be our best selves and be in an environment where we can actually thrive as employees. So it's a huge honor and a pleasure to have my values and passions aligning with the work that we do at our organization. Specifically for myself, what I do in my role is somewhat on the data side, and I work with clients to help them diagnose current state. And that could be aspects of their culture, their leadership team, or taking a look at employee engagement data. And through that, I also lead some workshops, conduct focus groups, and teach leaders new skills so they can go out and create meaningful and intentional action plans based on the data points that we're reviewing. And so my intention for tonight's talk will follow my typical MO that I do with clients. We're going to take a look at some research, some industry trends, and then we're going to talk through some potential solutions. And I do want to share that I'm very much on the applied side, and I'm going to weave in some client stories and perspectives along the way. So I'm excited to dive right in, and as I do with clients, I want to start with what's the current state of what we're looking at. So thinking about the current state of the workplace, I'd love to hear from the crowd what are you experiencing in this post-pandemic workplace as a challenge? And if you're not quite working yet, what are some of the things you're hearing from either friends, colleagues, or family? Anyone willing to share? Yeah.
I feel like we hear a lot about burnout.
Burnout.
With,
Okay.
work, right?
Yeah.
You really know when to turn off work.
Yeah.
You have it all the time.
Yeah, there's no clear division between work. So she was sharing remote work burnout is a very real problem. Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Well, don't worry. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sort of extending that,
Yeah.
the need to build hybrid workplaces.
Yes.
Including here in academia. I'm a
Sure.
professor in business here.
Okay.
But still, the need to be able to do things in a hybrid fashion.
Yeah.
People came to expect that,
Right.
and now it's hard to turn it on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sharing that even in fields such as academia, how do we create those hybrid work environments, and even environments that have had some sort, managers definitely struggling with, how do I manage both remote and in person at the same time? And how do we, as it's become an expectation, how do we create that in specific environments? Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And much of what you've shared is in line with what we've heard from our clients. So this is just several of the items we've also heard. Touching on what you haven't shared or heard yet is just the difficulty in managing across several generations in the workplace, people are genuinely struggling physically, mentally, emotionally. We've been through a lot in the past couple years. Digitization is a concern for folks. How is AI going to impact my job, impact my industry? There's existential threats in the world, political and social unrest, and a major one is that leaders in general are struggling. And as we think about what we're hearing as current state challenges, it's also helpful to take a look forward and think about the projected future trends in the workplace. And what I'm sharing with you here is a future of work trends from Gartner, who is a technological and consulting firm, and they put out an annual report based on work trends that they're seeing. And this is meant to be helpful for folks in HR as a toolkit so they can strategize in the year going forward. And there's 9 of them here. I'll touch briefly on each of these. We won't dive into all of them here tonight, but a few of them here is this idea of quiet hiring. So the past year, we heard this idea of quiet quitting, where folks were not going above and beyond anymore. And we're now shifting to quiet hiring, where we're looking at who do we currently have in the workplace and how might we be able to teach them new skills to fill that gap in talent that we're missing. The second one there is hybrid flexibility is reaching the front lines. Not everyone has had the luxury of being able to work remotely. We're now having to think of how can we give that opportunity to folks who don't typically have that in the workplace. Number 3 is something we are going to dive further into, and that is this idea that managers are, number 1, struggling, but also they are sandwiched in between managing expectations up to those they report to, and also managing the people that work for them. The 4th is pursuit of non-traditional candidates in the talent pipeline. We have a massive talent shortages, and instead of focusing on experience and education, we're having to expand that into where might we be able to tap into learning agility and be able to teach people new skills to fill those roles. The 5th is healing some pandemic trauma. We've all had a level of big T trauma, little t trauma throughout the pandemic, and people are mentally struggling. So we're shifting to thinking about how can we provide wellness or mental health benefits in the workplace. The next is organizations are pushing forward on DE&I. However, they're up against some resistance at times. And some folks are unsure as to the benefit of these efforts, and those who are leading them are trying to navigate those challenges. Number 7 and 8 is all around data usage, and the first one being using employee personal data to help customize either their experience or, certain parts of the journey in employment without compromising their privacy rights. So that's going to be a big concern, along with AI. AI has been great, but there is a natural bias that is built into some of the assessments that we're using in selection. So you're going to continue to see that in the news and with legislation on how we crack down on eliminating that bias. And the last one here is something we'll expand upon further, and that is that Gen Z is feeling that they have this gap in social skills given the time that they entered into the workforce. So we'll be touching on that a bit more here, but so that we're not here all night, I'm going to narrow down into 3 very specific topics that are in demand and I think is of most importance here. And that is going to touch on the generation differences. We have the most variety of generations in the workforce currently, and it's brought some challenges along the way. We're then going to talk about leadership burnout. We've talked a little bit about remote work burnout, but leaders are feeling very pressed in terms of what the demands are being placed upon them. And the third is talent and leadership shortages. We are short in leadership, we're short in talent, and we're going to talk about the impacts of that. All right, so let's dive right in. We're going to talk about the generational differences. And what you're seeing here is a breakdown of all the generations, their names that they go by, and of course my slide misformatted right before this, but that's okay. And you're seeing the years grouped there, and that is representing the years that they were born. And so I don't want folks to get hung up on the cutoff dates because there's some debate around that. But what I want you to focus on is this really is a way of looking at the stages that people are in their career. So we can think about Gen Z as they're early in their career, they're entering the workforce. That also captures some of the millennials as well. But then we can think about the other half of millennials and Gen X being mid-career. As we move on to baby boomers and the silent generation, they are either already in retirement or nearing the end of their career. And sometimes the silent generation is referred to as the traditionalists, and they are primarily out of the workforce. However, I did recently work with a couple clients who have all 5 generations represented in the workforce. And so as you can imagine, looking at the span of dates there, these folks have had different life experiences, they've seen different things, they've had different economic circumstances within the organization, as well as just life in general. And so they're going to show up to work expecting very different things and looking to get very different needs met. And as you can expect, this has put some strain on the folks that are leading across all these different generations. We also have baby boomers leaving the workforce at massive numbers. We have roughly 10,000 of them either nearing retirement age or leaving the workforce on a daily basis. They are the largest generation we've had in the workforce, and this is going to continue to leave us with a shortage of talent along the way. We also have millennials reaching roughly 50% of the workforce. And then we have, of course, Gen Z, who's entered, they've graduated college, they're now entering the workforce, and they are showing up with different needs and expectations from work. And now all of this is setting us up for a bit of a cliff event, and I'll explain why that is. When we have the largest generation of workers leaving, and then the second generation of Gen X, we don't even have enough of them to fill all the positions that baby boomers will be leaving vacant. It's going to continue to grow in this leadership gap. We also have a large group of millennials who aren't quite trained up in the ability to take on these roles just yet. And so this is leaving a lot of CEOs, people in upper leadership positions, very concerned because they're now wanting to retire, but they are unable to, just given the times that we're in. And so this will continue to be an issue if we don't get ahead of these talent shortages. And like I mentioned, Gen Z is showing up and demanding different from the workforce. And oftentimes when I've worked with clients and we're reviewing their engagement data, we're finding that Gen Z and millennials have the lowest amount of engagement. And what I mean by that is when we say folks are engaged, it means they have a level of emotional commitment to an organization and its goals. So they are disengaged. And leaders are struggling to understand what that is and how they can reach those people and understand them better. And I want to narrow in on that Gen Z grouping because I feel that they're the most misunderstood and where leaders struggle to speak Gen Z, if you will. And so talking through a few solutions when it comes to this generation, we can think about the fact of what they were walking into as they entered the workforce. They walked in during some very turbulent times. A lot of them in their either undergrad or high school, they had internships be canceled. They couldn't go study abroad as planned. They started their first job entirely remote, which is not something a lot of us had to do right off the bat. So they didn't get that shoulder-to-shoulder learning time with their older peers. They didn't get that informal learning. They didn't have those water cooler talks in the way that so many of us got to do. And so they're filling that gap in their ability to feel that they're ready to be in the workforce. So hence why about half of them feel that their education just simply didn't prepare them for what they're stepping into. This group was also raised by some of us. So they were raised by millennials, by Gen X, baby boomers, who taught them to want different from work. I've talked with several Gen Z folks and colleagues even who shared stories of watching their parents get up and go to work, and they didn't hate it, but they didn't love it. And they watched them go through the motions of getting that paycheck, and they taught them to want more. And so also by seeing, they've even shared, we've watched millennials just grind and struggle and just feel that they're in the same space spinning their wheels, and we don't want that. So they're actually demanding that they have more meaningful work, and that's more important to them than salary. When you think about it, some of them even shared, we came in during 2 recessions and we've watched our parents get laid off from 2 jobs. So if I'm going to be working, it better be meaningful work. I don't want to be just a number anymore. And because of their lack of opportunity with what we have had in just informal learning, they're hungry for growth and development, and they're demanding it. And if they're not provided that opportunity, they're not afraid to leave a job, whereas some of us in previous times would have thought, oh no, that's okay, I'm just happy to have a job. That just won't cut that anymore for this generation. And so typically, as we think about Gen Z and what we can do to attract and retain them in the workforce, a couple options here to talk through. And I've seen a lot of companies have a lot of success around creating a mentorship program where they're pairing someone early in their career with someone who is further along in their career. They're able to learn and perhaps get more of that shoulder-to-shoulder learning time with someone who's further along. And this is going to help them build confidence and those social skills that they're seeking and feel that they lack in the workplace. The second is meaning and purpose. And I already said they're going to be expecting this and demanding this from the workplace. So how can we help create line of sight for those Gen Z workers? And what I mean by that is, how can we connect that day-to-day work that they're doing and connect it to, here's how you have an impact on your team, here's how you have an impact on the organization, and here's even how you have an impact on society as a whole. And sometimes it can simply be that conversation that helps them see that reframe of, you do have a positive and meaningful impact. And the last one is that development. Again, they're demanding it. How can we start to have those conversations earlier with these folks and identify perhaps who might be in our leadership pipeline? Again, we're going to have a shortage of leaders, so it helps to start having these conversations earlier. I think often development has been saved previously for those further along in their career, but we need to start thinking about development at all the levels in the organization. So as you can imagine, leaders are learning to try to speak Gen Z, manage across all these generations, but these are not the only struggles that leaders are facing. There are an abundance of struggles that leaders face on a day-to-day basis, and I'm curious for those here in the crowd, how many of you, just show of hands, currently are leaders? Okay. Couple hands up. And how many of you were promoted to leaders because you were really good at doing the thing and getting results? Okay, a few more hands. And then for those of you who were promoted for doing the thing and getting the results, were you provided training specific to being a leader once you were promoted? Show of hands. Okay, so we had a mixed response there. And what we see with not being provided training post-promotion is rather common. Folks who are rock star individual contributors, meeting those goals, getting those results, are often then promoted, but the skills that it takes to meet those individual goals are very different from moving into a leadership position. Because leadership is all about getting results with and through others, which takes a very different skill set than what we're used to when it's just us. And so when they're promoted, there isn't a management 101 book placed on your desk. Sometimes they have to learn through trial and error, but when we can give them the proper training, that can help eliminate some of those struggles that they're facing. And with this growing gap in talent and leadership, a lot of leaders are also having to play the role of coach and player. So what I mean by that is they have their own work they need to complete while managing others. So if we think about the financial industry, they're likely going to have their own book of clients they're managing. If we think about direct care, this is folks who are going out and providing service on top of having to also manage others. So they're feeling that strain of having to do a lot of things all at once. As a result, many leaders are burnt out. And so taking a look at some of those contributing factors to that, About 72% of leaders are feeling used up at the end of the day. And if you think about the fact that they're having to show up and manage their own work and manage others, it makes sense that they're feeling fully tapped out by the end of the day. Throw in some factors of, I don't know how to manage remote, I don't know how to manage hybrid. It's new struggles and challenges that they're facing. And only 15% of leaders feel prepared to help prevent employee burnout. And if you think about it, when you're drowning in your own burnout and not knowing how to get out of it, it makes sense that you're going to struggle to be able to see that in others. And then lastly, less than half of managers feel that they have the skills necessary to be able to do their job. You can imagine if you're trying to show up and do your job every day, but you don't feel that you have the skills to be able to do that, it's going to create a natural state of anxiety. And as you're continually showing up in that state, that's going to wear on you over time. And why this is going to continue to be critical to address is because the leader plays such an important role in the organization. It's truly the window through which employees see the organization. And Gallup has said that employee engagement makes up roughly 70% of employee engagement. So meaning they can have up to 70% positive impact and a 70% not so great impact. And so we want to get ahead of this before leaders are able to really cast that shadow of burnout, because we have this new group of Gen Z entering the workforce, seeing leaders struggling and grinding, and they're taking a look and saying, yeah, I don't think I want that. Don't sign me up for that. And that's certainly not going to help our leadership development talent drought that we're currently going through. So thinking forward on solutions, potentially, I want to talk about leadership effectiveness. And what we do at Advise is we work with organizations to help them identify what good leaders need to be able to say and do at their organization. And it's going to look different everywhere you go, but once you can define that and those behaviors, you can help leaders identify what they need to do to show up that way. From there, you can determine if leaders have the proper training that they need. And again, that goes back to those skills that folks feel that they don't have. When we can give that to them, again, it's going to continue to alleviate some of those concerns. The second one is coaching. And so recently, we had an internal workshop. One of my colleagues, Mike Elliott, Mike, hi, if you're tuning in there. And he did a really wonderful job sharing some of his learnings as an executive coach. And he shared his philosophy around, as he's coaching others, he's doing his best to show up as a tourist in their world. And he's a bird watcher, if you will, observing them and helping them see the patterns that they're working through. And as you think about it, if we're a leader in our own jar or organization and you're stuck inside, it's really hard to read that label from the outside. And it's so powerful to have someone just bear witness to you and really hold up that mirror to what you're going through in those challenges and help you workshop that. And so coaching has a numerous amount of benefits, and it has been shown to lead to more self-esteem, self-efficacy, critical thinking, problem solving, and really helping reduce that burnout when you feel that you're not continually stuck in that rut of burning through the same thought patterns, same challenges that you're facing day in and day out. And the last one here is work-life harmony, sometimes referred to as work-life balance, which we talked about with remote work. It's really hard to find the turn-off point. So how can we find more of a harmony, especially for our leaders? And oftentimes, yeah.
May I just say that I love the fact you're using harmony as opposed to balance.
Yeah.
Balance assumes that it's a dichotomy. You've got one or the other.
Yeah.
Harmony shows that you can blend the two together. Sometimes they'll be dynamic together, sometimes they'll be quiet together, but it's always blending and having harmony as that goes. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that distinction.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And what he was sharing is that sometimes with balance, it can be such a dichotomy of almost thinking it has to be even, which at times it's not going to be, depending on where you are in life and work in general. So harmony is about finding what works for you. And oftentimes when we work with leaders, what we're finding is they're sometimes setting the example that they don't realize that they're setting. They might be working on vacations or sending emails on Sunday saying, hey, I don't expect a reply from you, but I'm just doing that. Whereas when we talk with the employees, they say, well, yeah, I got that email on Sunday, but that's my boss, that's the leader. Of course I'm going to reply, even though they said don't, because I'm looking to you as the pinnacle of success and what I should be doing. And so how can we as leaders take a step back and start to take the actions we want to see our people doing? So encouraging them to turn off their phones, to not answer work emails on vacation, and not have that expectation. Because the shadow of the leader is very real, and people will look to that as an example of what they should be doing. And so, as we think about additional struggles that leaders are facing, as well as organizations in general, the reality is we are still having talent shortages. And so it is constantly top of mind. We continually talk about the war of talent in the workplace and how we can get the best of the best to work for us. And a lot of organizations are struggling with high turnover rates. And people in recruiting and HR have shared that they often have a hard time getting folks at the leadership level to understand the true struggle they have with filling these open and vacant positions, oftentimes feeling it's not done fast enough or it's open for too long. And as the role of IOs, or people who work with executive or C-suite team members, our job is to help communicate those people challenges and how they directly relate to that bottom line. And with the upcoming challenge of having most of the baby boomers leaving the workforce by 2030, we have a massive shortage that is about to happen. Again, going back to that cliff event, where we're going to have roughly 85 million people that we don't have positions for. And that's roughly the size of Germany, which is hard to comprehend. And the reality is that has a significant financial impact on businesses, with 8.5 trillion in unrealized annual revenues. So we can't get any more bottom line than that. One positive sign, though, is that this is becoming more top of mind for CEOs. And what you're seeing here is a graph from DDI, who's another consulting firm in leadership development. And what they did was they surveyed groups of CEOs and asked them their top challenges. As you look at that green box there, what you're seeing is the top 3 that's really keeping them up at night is all related to people challenges. Attracting and retaining top talent, developing that next generation of leaders, as well as maintaining an engaged workforce. And going back to that cliff event we talked about, the reality is this is becoming top of mind because those baby boomers who are leaving can't actually retire. And we've worked with clients who've shared, I'm ready to retire, I want to retire, but I don't feel that I can fully step away and feel good about that, or I don't have my leaders quite where I need them to be. And so this is going to continue to be top of mind for them. Thinking about how we can help shorten that gap in leadership and talent spots that we have open, proposing a couple options here, and that is to start thinking about internal recruiting, which I believe is currently going on in organizations, but instead of focusing on experience or education, we're going to need to shift to looking at how can we upskill and teach new skills to the employees that are currently in the workforce, identifying learning agility where folks are motivated and want to learn new aspects of roles within the organization. And then I'm touching again here on leadership effectiveness, but assuming we've determined what good leaders should say and do at our organization, we should also have a way to be able to measure how they're performing against that. Hopefully an objective way that you're able to measure that, but we need to have an idea of how employees are feeling, because again, the leader plays such a massive role in that employee experience. And so some potential ways of doing that are issuing 360 feedback assessments, as well as general one-on-one feedback, skip a level, meetings, and whatnot. And the last one here is culture. And organizations all have a culture, whether they're intentionally creating it or not. And we want to be creating a magnetic culture. And what I mean by that is people are drawn to the organization. They want to work for you. They align with your mission, vision, and values, and they see that they don't just live on the wall, they actually see them being lived out on a day-to-day basis. And we help organizations define what that aspirational culture is and how we can get there. And it should be the competitive advantage that helps you in that recruiting process as you're thinking about filling your talent positions. And I'll toot on Advise's horn here just a little bit, but even when we don't have any open job positions posted, we'll have at least 5 people applying a week. And when asked what they want to apply for, they will say anything, because we built such a reputation around our culture and the work that we do that people naturally want to work and with us and be a part of that. So very honored again to be a part of that culture. So thinking through how we can attract and retain talent, another important component is how do we keep the folks that are at the organization engaged? Now, I've been doing employee engagement for a couple years now, and I want to share some best practices that I've learned along the way. And I think every organization should have some form of employee engagement metric that they're tracking. We need to have a pulse on how employees are feeling and doing. And hopefully a third-party, scientifically validated employee engagement survey would be great, but some way of keeping track on how employees are feeling. From there, assuming you've launched that assessment, we need to know that there's a communication plan going out. Folks need to hear back. Thank you. We've heard what you said. Here's what we plan to do with that. We need to have a communication plan. And then lastly, the most important part is taking action on the feedback that you're getting. And now, even if you can't take action on everything, communicating that is a huge component. And this lets employees know they've been heard. Because when we often launch surveys and we don't do anything with what we've heard, employees start to feel, what's the point of taking the survey again? I didn't see any action from it. I think we're just checking a box. So these are the 3 critical components that I would say are important to employee engagement. All right, so thinking around employee engagement, I want to capture just how important it is. And I'm gonna have you just close your eyes for a moment. Go with me. And I want you to think about a business result that you're hoping either your team or the organization you work for can accomplish this year. All right, everyone got one? Okay. All right, and hopefully whatever you came up with is directly tied to a business result. And you can go ahead and open your eyes now. And so as we think about just an example of that, perhaps you work on a team and you want to be able to create a new product. That's a business result. Well, when you create a new product, you need to be able to have people to buy it. And you want people to continually buy the product that you're creating. And this is the first part of the chain. And as we think about how do we get returning customers over and over again, well, likely it's tied to an employee experience that they've had. And asking the group here, have you ever had an experience with either a vendor or a service provider where you said, you know what, because of that experience, I'm a customer for life. I will continually buy from you. Let's see some head nods there. And on the flip side, I imagine some of you have also had the opposite experience where because of that experience, I will never work with them again. I will never buy from them again. And the head nods are even more vigorous here because of that experience. And likely it was tied to an employee. So when we have really engaged employees, this is where folks feel very positive, they're confident, they're going above and beyond to get the job done, leading to that customer satisfaction. And as a result, the people who are poured into by their leaders, when we have effective leaders who are having those line of sight conversations, are having those development conversations, are helping practice work-life harmony for themselves, they're learning the skills of knowing what good leaders say and do, we call that leadership effectiveness. And that is hinged upon their ability to learn those skills. And oftentimes what we see is companies will work this chain from right to left. But we want to think about how can we work this chain from left to right. Start by pouring into our leaders, because I think throughout this presentation here tonight, the key theme through all of this that we've hooked back to is the power of leadership in every aspect. They are the ones who we see the organization through that window. And so as IO psychologists, or folks who are working with leaders, we help them learn how to build those relationships, how to maintain and build creative and magnetic cultures that people want to show up and be a part of. And leaders create the conditions for people to help build this chain. And that's why leadership is so important and powerful to how we can future-proof the state of the workplace. All right, I've been talking for a very long time, and I want to hear from some of the group here as you reflect on what we've talked through tonight. And just a show of hands here, new graduates or soon-to-be graduates within the next year or two. Can I just see a show of hands? All right. So as you reflect on tonight's presentation, is there a major takeaway that you're having or something you might do going into the workforce? Yeah.
I really like that last slide where it started with leadership
Yeah.
and moved down to the business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that the strategic relationship chain, and we teach that in a lot of our leadership journeys. So glad you enjoyed it. All right. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on exactly what I was going to share as just some advice there. And she was sharing oftentimes maybe older leaders who have been in the workforce may not know how to initiate some of those conversations or build those relationships. So how might we advocate for that? And that's great. I would encourage those Gen Z folks or newer to your career, take some ownership of your development, seek out a mentor if you can, and start having those conversations early. Okay, how about IO and HR professionals? Show of hands here in the crowd. All right. Dr. Sim, will you share just a takeaway or maybe a do different that you've learned from tonight's talk?
What I took away was the shadow of the leader.
Yeah,
A
okay.
lot of what you described are bad habits that I have
Okay.
myself. But then I realized
Yeah.
too that sometimes even if I think I'm just doing it, don't it's just
Yeah.
me staying up late or saying
Sure.
emails that it does sort of I am role modeling behaviors for
Yeah.
my students and future leaders.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So Dr. Sim was vulnerable in sharing just the shadow of the leader and how that resonated with her, and that some of her bad habits that she's admitting to and how she's really role modeling maybe behavior she doesn't want to see or encourage in her students. So thank you. Okay, and then lastly, just leaders in general. Show of hands here. Okay, anyone willing to share a takeaway from your perspective?
I'm more interested in the new grad who are line of work. If you don't mind sharing
Yeah.
advisor or similar companies, what your clients have worked with that.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably a great segue to our Q&A that we'll get to here shortly. So the question was, what type of cool clients have we worked with? And I don't know that I can name names, but I will say that I've gotten to work with a wide variety of clients, from government clients to in the entertainment industry to, healthcare providers. The list goes on and on, but I've been really fortunate to work with a lot of leaders at all levels, and I have to say that I've probably learned just as much from our clients and just their ability to want to show up each and every day. So names I'm sure you all would have heard of, but some in the transport industry as well. All right, is now a good, oh yeah, go ahead.
Good. And just wanted to add as
Yeah.
a leader, and then also my doctorate's in organization development, so it's
Perfect.
parallel to IO psychology.
Yeah.
And as you talk about the generations, yes, Gen Z is different from previous generations.
Yeah.
And yet in many ways, they're the same. Just last week, I went over Frederick Hertzberg's 1968 article, What Really Motivates People. And in 1968, what he talked about was development, satisfying work,
Yeah.
and the work itself was most important. Salary was lower on the priority
Yeah.
list. And so it's not that different than people previously.
Yeah.
And so that's a consistency then that leaders ought to work on. And the fact of the matter is that we haven't worked on it for the past 50 years, and that's why it's still a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And what he shared was just the fact that, look, going back to years and years of research, is that people want meaningful work and development. So not much has changed, and I would agree with you. And I think what has maybe changed is the priority of focus for these groupings. Whereas I think people go through the motions through much of their career to then finally realize, I did not prioritize my passion. I did not prioritize meaning and purpose, and it becomes even more important after you got done chasing the money, if you will. So I think Gen Z, while it's not very different, it's just something they're demanding more upfront. So yeah, I appreciate that reflection. All right. Any other questions? I understand we're going to have a roving mic, so feel free to keep asking.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Where do you start? We talk about we wish there was a management 101.
Yeah.
What does seem to be the recurring themes or just
Sure.
the areas where people seem to need the most awareness or development?
Yeah. Well, I can say with Advisa, at least, we have really 3 tiers of leadership development, and the Emerging Leader Series is meant for folks who've never managed before or are just starting to manage early in their career. And so we start there, and all of them are meant to build upon one another. And so what I would say is for folks who are looking for that, be an advocate for your own development. Find those programs like an Emerging Leader Series. Look at LinkedIn Learning. Start to determine what you need, because I think what a lot of leaders are finding is if they're not seeking out the development, it's not going to just come to them. But if you have a program that's tiered, that's a great way to just start out and then build upon that. Did I see another hand up there? Yeah. 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 And so the question there was, how might AI be impacting us to help get top talent? And I know, especially in the tech field with certain selection, it's been helpful in them probably processing a lot of those assessments or applicants. I think where we run into some issues is where, again, there's that bias in the selection or maybe cutoff scores that we're relying on. But I will say I think it's helpful in the sense of it can help people do more work. So if we're giving people an ability to do more work in a better way, that can perhaps alleviate some of these burnout symptoms that we're feeling, and we can keep those talents there. But I do think it's going to be an interesting time with AI, and I know a couple of you are going to SIOP as well, so I'm looking forward to some sessions on that, because I know that there's some real legislation that's going to be coming down on AI. So who knows how long we'll be able to use that in the selection process or what that might look like. But I do also think that's an interesting topic. Yeah.
How does Advisa define success? The easiest thing we can do is pay Advisa a fee for your services.
Sure.
But how you coach the team to advise them. The ROI is sometimes tough to quantify. Or
Yeah.
it's measured long after you got your audit.
Sure.
You guys work with the leaders on that.
I love that question, probably because I have an answer for it. But the question was, how does Advisa measure success? Oftentimes, we're trying to capture ROI for maybe leadership development or what have you. And as folks in HR and IO, sometimes the challenge is arguing for that return on investment as you're asking for funding to invest in leaders or the workforce. And so we've taken a really intentional approach of capturing impact. So we have someone very specific on our team, Andy, who captures that data point. So we use some Kirkpatrick measurement. I know Dr. Sim will be happy to hear that, but we're capturing that for the clients that we work with because that's what we want to prove, that the money that they've invested, the time they've put their leaders through training, we're seeing really defined impact. And that's both qualitative and quantitative. And those have been some really powerful meetings that she's been able to be a part of. So great question. Anything else? Yeah.
Can you tell us more about your day-to-day? So I
Sure.
meet with leaders, but what does
Yeah.
the typical day look like?
Sure. So typical day can vary depending on what I've got going on. I could be in the midst of launching an engagement survey for a client, doing that project management for them. I could be analyzing the results. I could be debriefing the results with clients. We also use another internal assessment that's for leadership and culture. So doing the same process there. So it can be a bit of debriefing. I know I'm going to have some upcoming focus groups. So meeting with employees to get a better understanding of certain things. Sometimes I'm leading workshops. Internal meetings is part of the course as well. Trying to think what else. Sometimes research. I like to stay up on, what's happening in the industry, doing my own research or looking for articles based on what I'm working on. I'm also getting into a little bit of risk assessment. So how do we keep our organization and our clients safe in the work that we're doing and protecting along that with data? So it's a little bit of a lot, depending on the day.
A jack of all trades.
Yes, there you go. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and wrap my time up here. If you have enjoyed this conversation and this topic, I put the QR code up there. You can sign up for Advise's newsletter. We'd be happy to have you. We put out some blogs each month, so feel free to capture that. I am certainly going to stick around, happy to chat with folks further, but I've also put my contact information up there if you'd love to connect with me. So thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you.